My name is Dr. Paulette Jones, and I'm the MPA Program Director, Master of Public Administration, Government, and Nonprofit. And I have pulled together an excellent panel today of people who are working in the field of public administration. And I will let each one of you introduce yourselves, because even though I know your name, I don't know a lot about each one of you. But Brian, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jones. My name is Brian Jepsen. I work for the Office of Management and Enterprise Services. I got both my bachelor's and master's at the University of Oklahoma, just down the highway. Got a master's in public administration, so I was excited when I came here to know that you guys had an MPA program here as well.
Exactly.
I've worked for the state for 13 years. I've started working for what was the Office of Personnel Management. Then in 2012, I went to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, and just recently in May, I returned to OMES. So I'm grateful to be here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for coming, Brian. And also Deborah Davis with Quest Executive Services.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Debbie Davis, and my company is Quest Executive Services. And I got here having served in the oil and gas industry, so I'm a recovering corporate person. What I did there was management, a little bit of project leading, project management, and then financial analysis. And I am thrilled to be here today hanging out with you guys. What I do at Quest Executive Services, I coach and train and consult with people just like you, wanting to make a difference. I have my master's through UTD. I have a coaching certification through UTD and CDR Assessment Group. I have a strength strategy certification, coaching certification, and then I have a leading out of drama certification, which is, in general terms, conflict management. Happy to be here.
That would be a little further south than OU. University of Texas. Which branch was it?
Dallas.
Dallas, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, not that far south, but okay.
Love it.
Good deal. Thank you, Debbie. Stan?
Hi, Stan Florence. I have been in law enforcement for 35 years, serving all in local, county, and state law enforcement. I currently work for the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. I've been a sheriff of Grady County. I've been the director of OSBI. I am so happy to be a step down from director and doing other things at OSBI, not in that top position. But have a bachelor's from Mid-America Christian. I have a master's from East Central University. And do a lot of teaching, consulting, strategic planning, things like that for law enforcement, working with the Sheriff's Association right now on some corrections issues. But enjoy what I do, enjoy our networking with fellow law enforcement and others. Really enjoyed this conference, being and meeting others who aren't in the law enforcement community and kind of sharing some of our ideas and common issues with one another. We can learn a lot from each other, so I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Wong. Thank you, Stan. Well, there are numerous issues facing today's supervisors, including ethics, safety in the workplace, phone addiction, social media addiction, how employers are dealing with legalization of drugs, and retaining the organization's knowledge base while so many workers are retiring. These are just a few of the issues that we'll try to address today. Probably not all of those, but we'll attempt at that. So I'm going to jump right into this. According to an article posted by the U.S. Department of Interior in 2017, 3 of the top 9 challenges for today's management include public safety and disaster response, operational efficiencies, and workplace culture and ethics. In 2017 was the first year that they listed public safety and disaster response. Now, what are the major issues OMES is grappling with today? Brian?
I think in addition to everything that you just mentioned, one of our biggest challenges are funding salaries to pay our employees to be able to compete and retain. We have lost cybersecurity, if you don't know, is one of the hottest fields in information technology right now. And we have seen all of our 15 to 20-year employees walk out the door because we simply can't afford to pay them. So one of the things in the public sector we're going to have to find a way to do, and we know we generally lag behind the private sector, we're going to have to find ways to attract and retain them, to retain employees, because we are not doing a very good job at that.
I would think that that would be one of the top priorities of state government.
One would think. It is an, and I say that in jest, but no, it really is. We're trying to do things, what we've been doing in my organization. When an employee leaves, we take a look at if we can do more with less, meaning take that salary and spread it around when someone leaves to be able to continue to keep those folks that are still there. If you don't, CACI Industries just has come on the scene in Mustang, I believe, and they are offering our employees sometimes 50% more than what their current salaries are. So that's a challenge.
It is a challenge. Whoever is going to be governor is going to have to face that.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Debbie, what do you hear from your clients along these lines?
I appreciate the opportunity to answer that and weigh in a little bit. So definitely can appreciate the challenge that is going to create. And the place that I end up coming in at is a little bit different. Yes, the salary is an indicator. Yes, the salary could be a problem, and in some cases is going to tip them to the scale of leaving. However, there's an element of environment when you're saying what is it that causes someone to stay, and I think creating a culture that is safe and collaborative and consistent speaks volumes. I mean, I just had a conversation with someone out in the hallway and took a pay cut because the pressure is too much. So I don't think that it might be something that's happening out there, but there are things I think that we can do as managers, leaders, to create a culture that is safe. So when we talk the list of things, and I would add to that a wellness program that includes mental health, so that we do,
absolutely,
as managers, as
yes.
leaders,
yes.
are mentally healthy. We do, as leaders, extend that mental health in a space where we're showing up present and being strong, and then also creating an environment where we cultivate that for our people.
Stan, we've had, you've been in law enforcement for a number of years, and you've also been a pastor. And so working with law enforcement, what seems to be, are these the major problems and issues that you see in these state agencies or even municipalities? Or what are the major issues?
Well, I certainly echo everything the panel has said so far, and I would go along with that. The pay is one thing. The availability of resources is another. As has been said earlier, the state has had gone through quite a bit of a budget crisis in recent years, and so many of the programs and opportunities we have to assist our employees have kind of gone to the wayside as well. One thing to follow up on what Debbie said a second ago that I think has been helpful to us, and that is this time for your employees to have that wellness program in place, and especially the mental health side of it. For a number of years, we have embraced a policy that allows every employee, and this is not just those who are carrying guns, but also we have a number of civilian employees in our organization. We allow them to have up to an hour and a half a week for their workout time, their exercise time, their wellness time. We're not restrictive on what that means and what that requires, but it does seem to be something that you can offer the employee, and I think ultimately, even though it's an hour and a half out of 40 hours you lose, I think the offset of that in productivity is certainly there. The other thing that was mentioned in the original question is one of the topics from that article dealt with ethics in the workplace. We're all dealing with that. Whether you look at the news every day, you see some organization somewhere, some high-ranking official slipping into that slippery slope of unethical behavior, and it becomes public. We deal with that every day. None of us are exempt from that, even the OSBI. And I think that one of the ways that we can do that is to, and we do this, we require every year for employees to go through some level of ethical training, some ethics training. That 1 hour, that 4 hours, that 8 hours of training, whatever it is, isn't enough in and of itself, but it keeps that issue at the table. And I think that one of the things that we need to be doing, all of us who are supervisors or have any level of influence on employees, is to not just rely on that one day or that half a day of training our employees go to. Let's keep talking about that. Let's make it something that is very much, we're aware of it as we go through the day. Maybe after you go through a project together or an incident together, you may sit down and sort of debrief, and let's talk about, what was the ethical dilemma you were faced with, and can you share with the group, the team, how you came through that process. And I think sharing with one another and keeping it on the forefront is one way of addressing ethical issues that just seem to be continuing to grow in our workplace today.
Thanks, Stan. I appreciate that. And if I may, I know you have not been, you've been very forthright concerning your Christianity. I know you're a committed Christian, and I was wondering if you might share with us how that Christianity has impacted your professionalism and your ethical code.
Well, it really began with the influence of my grandparents and my parents, and being raised in a Christian environment has certainly helped me to understand at the very basic levels the difference between right and wrong and treating people fair and doing the things that you should on a day-to-day basis. And it really goes on beyond that, more than just your interaction with others, being honest with yourself. Are you working 8 hours a day, or are you working 7 hours a day, and what are you going to put down on the timesheet when really nobody knows except you? And I think what my faith and my Christianity that I embrace teaches me to do the right thing every day. And when I do that, then what I'm doing is I'm actually sharing the basic biblical Christian principles that I think we all should. And so for me, it really started early. It became a way of life for me. And while we don't necessarily talk a lot about that in the workplace, I think our examples of that day in, day out is a piece of instruction in and of itself. And I would hope that all of us could embrace just those basic principles of practice, the Christian practice principles that we do every day, and follow the example of Christ and do what's right every day. And in doing so, I know that we're all blessed from that, including our organizations.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thanks, Stan. Anything to add to that, Debbie?
I would say I always end my classes or try to end my classes with progress, not perfection. And I think that wanting to and striving to, coming from a great place, is absolutely necessary because there are so many things out there that can trip you up. And
that's true.
Find mentors, find people who can help hold you accountable. I think
Most
that's
definitely.
critical, especially when you're feeling tempted. And be in touch with your feelings. Like you said, be very aware of what's going on for you.
Balance is a beautiful thing.
It really is.
So, Brian?
Debbie, I agree with you. Finding a role model or somebody that you can look to as an example is an excellent thing. And also, just the basic principle of what would you do if nobody was looking? If nobody was watching you, would you still do the same thing that you would do in front of an audience like this? And so if you have that guiding principle in your life, I think that sets you on a path to do the right thing.
Absolutely. Good comments. Thank you all. About the ethical issue, here's a statement from the Department of Interior. We have identified instances in which some DOI employees, including senior officials, have engaged in unethical or illegal conduct as well as other misconduct. These violations have included sexual harassment, the acceptance of gifts from outside sources, conflicts of interest, including the use of public office for private gain, and the misuse of government resources. How do things look different in Oklahoma, or do they?
I think they do. I think they look a little different in Oklahoma. We have a pretty strong ethics program for speaking from state government. We are pretty big on transparency. We've done a lot to make sure that spending, salaries, open records requests, those are all answered. Is any organization perfect? Probably not so, but we've definitely done a lot more than I say from the stories I've heard from the 80s. So I think I think we're making progress. So.
Love that. My positivity loves to hear that we're making progress. I would go to the, anytime there is free will, you run the risk of having opportunity for making poor choices. And so I think a beast that exists. And so I always go back to, one, mental health, and to control what you can control, which is you. So take ownership in your choices and show up exactly like Stan said. I loved it. I think you're right. It's try to be Christ-like.
Stan?
What I would say to that is one of the things that we see in ethical behaviors with regard to that then leads to criminal activity. Then we sometimes have to step in. Let me give you an example, because I see this example happen a lot. You take we'll just say a rural water district in Oklahoma, and we find out the allegation is that the clerk of that water district has embezzled $200,000. And you go back and look at sometimes the root causes of that, and it really goes back to the lack of transparency, accountability, checks and balances. We all do have free choice, free will, and we all have to make sure that the choices we make are the right choices. Where I sometimes see it begin is at the very infant stages. The person doesn't decide day one they're going to embezzle $200,000. They have this cash drawer, and they think, I need $50 tonight to go by the grocery store, or sometimes go to the casino, and I'll put it back tomorrow because I didn't go by the bank today. And so they do that, and they go by the bank on the way to work next morning and put that $50 back. But that lessens the threshold for them. Their conscience is clear because they brought the money back. Did they do anything right or wrong? Well, that's the question to begin with. But then they do it next week, and they don't bring it back the next morning. They bring it back in 3 or 4 days. And they feel better about themselves because they brought the money back. And then the next thing you know, in 2 or 3 weeks, they do it again, and they bring it back a month later. And then somehow they begin to forget it, or they don't bring back as much. And so you get on that slippery slope of ethical decision-making, and we just have to be so mindful about that and be guardful about that. Hold each other accountable. Certainly we want to hold ourselves accountable ultimately, but let's put a system in place that we're helping each other when that decision has to be made when nobody else is looking.
Holding each other accountable, iron sharpens iron, all of those things that are, peer pressure to do what's right, to do what's ethical, all of those are great ideas. Let's switch gears just a little bit here. We have a new law that has legalized marijuana. And so my question to each one of you is, how is this affecting your workplace?
Well, I will say that I'm really interested to hear what you have to say coming from OSBI, Stan, but I can tell you that where we work, what we've done, we've started to implement a policy, and here in Oklahoma, it's kind of an unknown. We don't really know how this is going to play out because from what I understand, the dispensaries are just starting to dispense and licenses are just happening. So this is an unknown phenomenon for Oklahoma because we haven't really had that experience. And so one thing that I believe that we should do is we should start to look to other states that have had medical marijuana for some years now and how that's affected their policies and their hiring practices and their drug policies. State statute says that you can have medical marijuana on you at work if you have a license. However, the employer has it's the employer's option to say whether they'll allow that on the premises. So I think this is going to be something that evolves, and I'm interested to see how it's going to play out.
Now, it's interesting because the state of Oklahoma would, at least the city of Oklahoma City, I should say, drug tests on a regular basis. And so the question is, if you have a certain amount of that in your body, is that acceptable? Is it acceptable to the state of Oklahoma employees?
Well, you're not allowed to be intoxicated at work. So,
sure.
So that's where you get into gray areas. If you're taking it as a medicine, I mean, just like you would take, I'm assuming, like a prescription pain medicine for a back injury or something, are you allowed to be impaired at work? And I think that's where the lines get blurry.
Okay. Deborah, what are you hearing for your clients?
So far, thankfully, nothing. However, I attended an HR conference a couple weeks ago and agree with what you said, Brian, relative to there are a lot of unanswered questions. Absolutely. And my takeaway from the conference was it's a risk, and it's an opportunity to sink a lot of money into it, unfortunately, for the employers. And so it just adds to the other dilemmas. And so I'll always weigh back to wellness, mental health wellness, and responsibility.
Stan?
Yeah, please.
Well, I think that, as the panel has previously said, I think we're at a state of just waiting to see what happens. And for clarification, I think everybody knows this, the legalization is for medical marijuana, not recreational. So we're kind of talking about maybe two different things to some degree, but the medical marijuana, we're really kind of working through that as a state. You know, for law enforcement purposes, you know, it's still illegal because it's a federal law that you can't do that.
Exactly.
So we do have that
Exactly.
dilemma, and we're going to stick to abiding by and requiring our employees to abide by what federal law says until that changes. Now, in the meantime, we do have those few instances that may come our way that we're going to have to address as it comes about. And I really think it's a little early to really draw any definitive conclusions other than we're all struggling with it right now and trying to figure it out. But I guess it's probably one of those questions that should be next panel too, next year, and just keep track of what's going on. But as managers and leaders of organizations, we do have to be fully aware of what's happening and know how we're going to have a sound policy in place that follows what the law says, but also would be agreeable to allowing those to use it for medical purposes as the law was designed to.
The beautiful thing about America is that we have all of these different states that pass different laws, and so we can always go back and look at these other states who have already been there and done that, and how are they coping with it, because like you said, it is against federal law, and yet we have people that are using in good conscience as state or city employees for medical purposes. Gray area, big open gap there. Of course, we will be addressing this in one of the sessions coming up. Another issue that has come up a lot recently, we looked at this a couple of years ago, and a lot of the journals for business, health, and psychology have all been looking and documenting the problem of phone addiction and social media addiction. So I'm curious to know how your agencies are addressing that issue. Brian?
We are actually not addressing it from a limitation standpoint. There was probably 3-4 years ago, we limited access to social media and have found out that more as social media evolves, many of our employees in the organizations that they're involved in use social media to promote professional development. So, from a training standpoint, for example, I'm on a regional board for the International Management Public Association for Human Resources, and we promote a yearly conference, and that conference is going to be in Oklahoma City, and a lot of that promotion goes to the other 13 southern states is through social media. And so quite often we find ourselves in a dilemma where there's social media use at work, and we want to limit that, but also I think when you take a look, and coming from my seat as a human resources professional, what is the goal? What goal are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to limit it so we can get a work product? And if we allow that freedom to the employee, what are we doing to the environment that the employee works in? Are we giving them that freedom to say, hey, let me check, see what's going on here. And as long as you're meeting goals and you're meeting your deadlines and you're producing a work product, I'm not so sure that we want to ratchet that down. That's just my opinion.
I'm going to play the opposition advocate on this, because I understand what you're saying, and as an employee, I understand that completely. However, I'm a little concerned about folks that are sitting there for a couple hours checking Facebook and Twitter and getting the recipes and whatever else. I don't know. I know I'm being a pain here, but
No,
it's a legitimate issue.
I agree with you. There's definitely a line where something comes to, when you cross a line of abuse at work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the beautiful thing about all the podcasts and some of the networks that are out there through social media is that you can connect with people on various issues. Quite frankly, I use my phone at my desk as a tool, because I don't want to have to go into my desktop and look at it, my email or whatever, whenever I can grab my phone and glance at it real quickly. But there are people, and I used to be one, that have a real problem with this puppy. And the problem is that there are social engineers who are driving you to that phone every 2 minutes, 5 minutes, not sure, there's a debate on the time length on that. But it is a real problem, and many people are having a problem just setting it down and leaving it alone.
I took my phone off the table because it was buzzing.
I heard it.
Well
Okay,
played.
Deborah, why don't you weigh in on this one?
So I love what you're doing. I think it's wonderful. I also hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I experience it too.
Yeah.
So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm by myself, and I have to hold myself accountable in order to be productive. And so that would, of course, you've listened to me enough to know that that's where I'm going to go, right? Be responsible. Hold yourself accountable to a higher level. But to that point, I think when you put rules in place and policy in place and are monitoring that and slapping hands, one, you create more work.
Yeah.
And almost
True.
it's like dangling a carrot out there for people to go, oh yeah, watch me. You know, kind of a scenario
challenge.
where you're going to be creating a situation that is not good. And so I think it can have the adverse effect is what you're saying, right? And I love that. I think empowering your people to make a wise choice and spend the time that they need to and not more, I think is the better and the healthier way to go, personally.
By the way, I
but
was
it-
just checking the time, okay? Just so you guys know.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree to an extent because I know that, you know, the bottom line is, are we getting the work accomplished that needs to be accomplished? And I'm a self-starter, so I want to know at the end of the day, did I do this and this and this and this? And did I get that, am I on the right track to get this major project going and get it accomplished? But I don't know, I talked to some folks with other organizations, and I'm amazed at how much time they spend on social media. But what do you think, Stan?
I would agree. I think that we don't restrict it. We don't monitor that closely. We do have fairly strict objectives that employees are supposed to meet. It's a little challenging for us because we don't have, while some employees work in an office environment or they work in a laboratory environment, we also have people who work in the field. They're investigators that may be in Guyman or Idabel or somewhere, and they're near supervisors an hour away. They're not monitoring what they do on a day-to-day basis. So we have to monitor it really from a distance perspective, if you will. And so we look at it from that standpoint. Social media is kind of like the marijuana question. It's an ever-evolving issue, and where at one point the social media was more for entertainment purposes and connecting with friends and things of this nature, but we're seeing more and more how it's used for business and for the relevancy of what we do
True.
every day.
That's very true.
And so I do like the idea of if there's a way to use social media with your employees and have an impromptu conference or post an important message that's important to all of them, utilizing social media. I guess if you can't beat them, join them, and find a way to utilize it in your favor, if that's possible.
Well, the president likes it.
Yeah, a lot of politicians are using social media anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the things we're doing at OMES is we're doing a campaign right now called Everyday OMES, where the divisions have submitted employee names, and I think a couple times a week on our social media page, OMES, they're featuring our employees, and they're talking about their stories, where they graduated from, what they do, how long they've been there, how their contributions are great. And so that's a good way, you know, again, with social media, it's a good way to feature your employees. And I think the flip side of that, kind of to what we've been discussing, is every employee should also, in the back of their mind, also know that if you're looking on your company device, that's also traceable and trackable. So we're able to know how long, if you're on social media for 4 hours, I mean,
Yeah,
you can track that, so.
yeah.
And I
But
think-
not so much on your phone.
No, which is why if you limit it on a company computer, they're just opens the door for people to bring iPads and phones, so. What do
Like you
do?
said, when nobody's watching, are you doing the right thing?
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line. Switching gears again, shootings and violence have increased in America. what would be some of the things, I'm going to toss this over to Stan, because Stan, you're in law enforcement and you have probably more information about this, although you guys got the questions in advance, so I'm going to pick on you too. But Stan, what would be some of the measures, reasonable measures to increase workplace safety?
Well, I think certainly we're talking about workplace safety, but I think all of us are looking at whatever public event, even home security issues anymore. What can we do to make sure that we are in a safe environment? First and foremost, always, is to be vigilant and watchful. What are the characteristics of somebody that's going to potentially be a threat? That's a whole day discussion in and of itself. I think, though, what it builds into is really the workplace, making sure that you are prepared for that. If a workplace or a place of business is not conducting some type of analysis, security analysis in the event of what happens or what they're going to do if something happens, they're really remiss. We see almost every day something happening somewhere, a synagogue, a school, a church. I never thought I got a phone call from my uncle a few months ago after the church shooting in Texas. I forgot the town, but south of San Antonio. He's a Free Will Baptist pastor in southern Oklahoma, and he said, can you put us in connection with somebody that can give us training on this? And so we have, through our state Homeland Security Department, there actually is training available for churches. But all of us have to embrace this idea and have not only a policy in place, but actually drills in place, like we have fire drills, like we have tornado drills. That is an added component as to what you can do. There's security measures you can do in the organization. I know places that have put in Cavalier, bulletproof vest type material on their lobby walls, so that if in the event a shooter comes in, they can't hopefully get past that. But really it comes down to vigilance and reporting that suspicious activity. You'd be surprised how when we do get that information in the state, how it gets disseminated out. I was in a meeting yesterday with some sheriffs in Guthrie for that north central part of the state, and there was something pushed out through our fusion center identifying somebody in the area from Oklahoma City to Guthrie who was a potential threat, not only to law enforcement but also the public. So you'd be surprised how quickly that's acted upon, and we have to go through a vetting process and try to identify the risk level and what we can do. But irregardless of all of that, behind the scenes, all of us have a responsibility to show some level of due diligence to make sure that we are exercising as best we can the abilities to keep our places safe and secure, and by whatever means that is, and it's ultimately the decision of that local organization. So I just think we have to really be vigilant about that. There is training out there available for that, and it might be that an organization makes a decision to implement that kind of training for their place of business.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me come back to you, Stan, because I think this is an important topic, and one of the questions I have is, whenever we do see these shootings or bombings or whatever is going to happen, we look back at the suspect and we trace back their actions, their Facebook page, their comments, their history after the fact. I guess my question to you would be, when is it appropriate to notify someone about your concerns about a person?
Anytime you have a concern, you should notify your law enforcement community, your representative, whether it's a police department or a sheriff's office or a state agency. You should notify them and put that person on the radar screen. You never know. It might be that there's already been an analysis building on that person already, and this is just what they need to finally take some definitive action to prevent something from happening. So never think for a second that you shouldn't report something like this. I think that that judgment should just be removed from the table. You go ahead and report it and let somebody who's already conducting that analysis and that examination and triaging the situation as they find it, and let us try to determine whether or not we need to take action on that. I think that's probably the best answer for that.
I agree with everything that was said. I also, kind of like you, Deborah, I'm the son of father who grew up in the Leave It to Beaver generation. He didn't believe in locking his doors for his car or house. And, you know, that's just not something that's acceptable today. That's not the right thing to do. It's not safe for my family, certainly at least. And, you know, one of the things I think when you talk about security and safety at the workplace, your technology, you know, your security measures 10 years ago may not be the same measures that you need to take. And my former employer, what we did was we had a security assessment done by the Department of Homeland Security, Jim McBride, and he came and he actually, in any of your organizations, he does free assessments. So I would encourage you to get him out there and have him take a look at your church or your workplace. And it was shocking to find out how wide open we were to so many different potential threats. And I never thought the office that I walked into every day, it was just that simple for somebody to walk through. We had no stops at those points of entry. Another thing, pictured name badges with magnetic access to points of entry. By the way, I'm killing it. I picked up the wrong name badge today.
You're forgiven, Brian.
But I really think that those things to have a name badge on you where somebody can identify the picture with the person, and then those accesses. Everybody doesn't need access to the same points, and that really helps protect you. Video cameras, having those in your parking lots to record activity, signage that clearly says that weapons are not permitted on the property, and some of the things that we're dealing with in state government now, they're called First Amendment auditors, and what these are folks that come in to buildings, and they'll come with a camera on a selfie stick, and they will walk into your building to report for whatever reason what's going on. And one of the things that we found out is they won't walk past a signage that says authorized personnel only, because they're not allowed to do that. But they know their rights, they know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And if we are not aware and we take the measures to make sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, we've opened the door for things like that to happen. So,
Interesting. Okay. Also, you brought up the Leave It to Beaver generation. Okay, let's look at that, because we're looking now in the workplace at several different types, age groups: millennials, Generation X, baby boomers. We got the whole enchilada here. We got so many different age groups that are in our workforce today. So my question to you, Brian, would be, how do you deal with all these different people? Because they're all coming from different points of view, different ages. How are you able to communicate with so many different age groups?
Here's my take on this. And I've thought a lot about this question, actually, because I think if you go to conferences, at some point somebody's going to bring up the topic of multi-generational workforces. You see it all the time, and I think, this is my opinion, we've come to a place where we have actually started to use unconscious bias. Well, this is a millennial, this is a Gen X, this is a baby boomer, and we start to put all of those people in one category. And I think that there are articulate people, there are funny people, there are silly people, there are organized and unorganized people in every generation. And so, one of the things I wrote when I was thinking about this, the definition of an unconscious bias: learned stereotypes that are automatic, deeply ingrained, universal, and able to influence behavior. So I think we have to be careful with those labels.
I agree.
Because that's not all the way true. That's not what defines every person.
Sure. Well, Stan, what do you think? I know you work with several different age groups also.
We do, and Debbie mentioned dialogue, and I was actually, the word I was going to put forth was just communication. Communicate with one another. I think the more we know about each other, the better. The more we understand each other, the better we're ultimately going to communicate and be able to fulfill the relationships that we have to have with one another. So it really comes down to that, and just let's not try to hide behind it. Let's not try to label it. It is what it is, and know full well that while we may finally get to a point where we understand each other, there's still a new generation coming. In fact, I mean, the things I'm hearing now, there's the next generation is the type that wants to put the technology down and have face-to-face dialogue. So that's refreshing. I hope that's true. It's the things kind of come full circle. And so that may be what we're about to see is, it'd be interesting if the next generation embraces some of the philosophies of the, what was the before the baby boomers, the traditionalists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, and I agree with you as well. There's nothing that is going to replace a face-to-face conversation or even
Exactly.
picking up the phone sometimes when things get lost in translation through text.
So true,
It's very important to have that dialogue open.
absolutely.
About
I
the
know.
relationships.
I deal with this issue with my students because of their schedule is so tight. They're juggling family, they're juggling school, they're juggling job. I understand that. But when you type text, you don't see the facial expression, you don't hear the tone of voice, you don't see the body language, you know, you don't have any of that. But whenever you are sitting across from someone face to face or even Skyping with face to face, it really does help a lot. So another question I had that's kind of related to this, guys, is the possibility of mentorship. I'm really curious to know, because I know a lot of people many of the baby boomers are retiring, they're leaving, they're going out the door. A lot of your brain trust is going out the door with them. So my question to you is anybody in your organization, at least that you're aware of, is using mentorships to get some of those older workers to work with some of the younger workers to guide them and mentor them?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that,
Absolutely.
Deborah.
Absolutely. I volunteer for a group called the Women's Energy Network Group, and they're women typically working in the oil and gas industry or the energy industry, and they are in Oklahoma City. The group is larger than Oklahoma City. It's nationwide. And their membership here in Oklahoma City and Tulsa is just about 1,000, give or take. And they have a mentorship program that is governed and very specific within that group, but they have extended it beyond the group into the companies. And so, yes, I see that a lot. And it's programs that are longer than just 6 months of transition. So it's identifying a succession plan for the people that will be leaving in 5 years, engineers typically, and hiring those out of college engineers and helping them succeed and helping the person retiring move on. And the benefit of that is not just to the new hire
Right.
or to the company. The person that is retiring, their exit is so much more graceful and more fulfilling than if they were ignored and it wasn't talked about and they were treated less than human.
Mhm.
So it's a great program.
Sounds wonderful.
No, good.
Okay, Stan?
In fact, just at this conference this morning in the session I presented, I talked about mentorship, and the one I attended with Dr. Roddy, she talked about mentorship and coaching. I think to a certain degree, we've done this in an informal manner, but I think organizations are beginning to see the value and beginning to discuss that and beginning to see how we're going to look to the future from succession planning and things of that nature. Ultimately, what we have to be better at than we have in the past, I'm talking about the past being years and years and decades, and that is looking to the future and trying to plan accordingly. And that means investing in strategic planning. It means in developing and investing into our development of our employees. And a huge component of that is the mentorship aspect. And I really think that begins at the early infant stages of a person's career. I think I've been in law enforcement 35 years, but I have people who I consider who are my mentors. And they may have less experience than me, and may be younger than me, but that doesn't necessarily mean an age situation, but it just means someone you can rely on, has good judgment, and you can have some kind of a one-on-one dialogue. So I think we definitely have done it in an informal setting, but I believe that I'm beginning to see, and I'm glad to see more of a formalized approach to this, and I think that's good news for all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brian, where's the state of Oklahoma on this issue?
We have an Office of Workforce and Development at where I work at OMES. I think it's a topic. I think it's something that's discussed, but I think it's also something that we could do better at. And I think the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time.
Sure.
And I think it starts with managers engaging their workforce. If you have an employee that has a knowledge in a certain area and you know that they're going to leave, I think it's incumbent upon you to come up with a plan rather than, oh no, oh no, oh no, he's out the door. And we see that happen so many times, and then you've got a void in your organization. So I think, you know, it's relational to a certain aspect. You know, you have to be able to know your employees, and if you have a relationship with your employee, sometimes, believe it or not, employees silo themselves and hold information, and if you don't have a good relationship with them, you're not going to be able to have that dialogue. Okay, what do you know? What do I need to know? Because sometimes they just walk out the door and turn off the lights, and everyone is left to figure out what to do next. So
Ouch.
I think it starts at the very low management level, and I think it's important to have a relationship so you can have that dialogue.
Absolutely. Guys, we've got to wind this up. Any concluding comments? Stan?
Well, I think that all the topics that Dr. Jones has presented are very relevant to us today. I appreciate that very fact. All of us are seeking to do what's best in terms of how we're leading and guiding our organizations. Ultimately, we're only here for a short time, and we're going to pass it on to somebody else. That is the responsibility and the mission of our organizations. So I just would encourage each of you to always keep that in mind. I think the mere fact that you're here says that you want to grow and develop and to have a positive impact on those who you're surrounded with. So I applaud you for that. Hope you'll take some of these topics and, you know, not wait for a panel session to put some thought into it. You've heard us talk, but begin to formulate your own thoughts and formulate your own actions on how you're going to advance your mission forward and address these things in a positive and a proactive way.
Thanks, Stan. Deborah?
Agree. Thank you all for being here.
I echo everything that Stan said, and I think these sort of settings are important for us to come and to grow and to learn. I certainly when I go to these things and I'm sitting in your seats, I certainly take notes and try to at least take something back. So hopefully this has been helpful and you'll take something back to your workplace.
Thank you all.